There we go. I was like, why is it so dark? I had to turn my light on. Welcome to People Rising, Friday, June 9th.
Yes.
Hey, the uh the days and weeks are there. Somebody just sent me I misread it. I thought it had something to do with our LinkedIn Live here because it said podcast, and I thought it said shriek. So I thought they were making like a nasty comment about my intro. And I said, boy, that was quick, but it said podcast and Shrek,
Got it.
not shriek.
This is why we can't be alone. We need the grown-ups to come back.
Yeah, Kim's not here. Kim is hopefully coming, but not
Yeah.
feeling well at this moment.
Yeah.
But I said, hurry up and get out. I said no such thing. Welcome to another edition. Today we're talking. Wait, before we get into that,
Yeah.
how are you, Shelley?
I'm good. I am. I was preparing for this conversation, and I was checking into. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Sunny in the sunny UK.
UK. See, there's a shift in the climate, Shelley. I was just telling you about that. It's sunny in the UK.
It's rainy in Georgia.
That's what I'm talking about. All kinds of crazy things happening.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. You were saying.
I was saying as I was preparing, I was going through some of my notes, and I literally closed the book. I thought this is a good conversation because when we were there was a reference to Larry Summers and his articles, and for those of y'all, you can probably Google it. But I really wanted to dig into some of the things that were being shared out last year. That kind of would spill into this conversation. For those of y'all on LinkedIn, I'm going to be using words that are on LinkedIn a lot. Just giving you a heads up.
Shelley's planning to use words from LinkedIn.
I'm using words.
I'm sort of in a silly mood today. I'm not sure why. Tell me.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about this?
So friends, there was this article, and by the way, Larry Summers, who I'm referencing, is a former Treasury Secretary here in the U.S. And there was an article that was out in 2022. So last year, when a lot of folks on the LinkedIn streets, especially, were talking about quiet quitters, and he mentioned in the article that he believed that quiet quitters were ruining the economy, and.
I'm sorry. That strikes me as humorous, obviously.
And I really wanted to dig into that because there was when I did see this article last year, but I wanted to come back to it again this year because as we're talking about, he was really trying to lean in on productivity. And I don't know if you guys remember last year, there was still a lot of angst with working from home and the way that people were correlating productivity with working from home. Although there has been, and I haven't seen any data to show that productivity took a dive because people were working from home. In fact, people were burning out because they were working so hard.
Actually, there was research that during the pandemic, productivity went up.
Yes.
And they attributed that, this was out of the University of Mexico. They attributed that, see if I can track that down while we're talking here, but
yeah.
They attributed that productivity increase to people not commuting.
Yes. Yeah, because
right?
You're spending more time working and less time commuting.
I think they said in the US we picked up, I think it was 60 million hours.
Oh my gosh.
60 million hours that people were no longer commuting, they could do something else. And in the article that I'm referencing, the something else they were doing is sleeping. I'm serious. That was in the article. I will get on the Google machine.
Yeah,
that actually still works, even though
the
thing is infused with AI.
Exactly.
Google still works.
Exactly. Exactly. I was starting there. I went back into that because when the article came out last year, and I was trying to dig a little bit deeper into thinking about this from an econ perspective or economic perspective. What does he mean? Like, and so I wanted to understand, or at least maybe we talk a little bit more about quiet quitting, because when quiet quitting, that terminology that was floating around on the LinkedIn streets last year, when I first saw it, and by the way, to my understanding, it started with the Gen Z population of workers, and they were sharing that, and it was I think it was on TikTok, to be honest. People were sharing that they were not doing 150%, like they were just doing what they were hired to do, and so quiet quitting really took a turn in the way that people were defining what it was. It kind of fluctuated a lot. There were people who were just saying, I'm not leaning in. For those of y'all who were around in the workforce before 2022, remember Lean In? You remember that? Leaning in, and where you were Run to the Fire was another one that was, a few years before that, where we were as a workforce. And especially for those of us who are not Gen Z or not millennial, and a little bit older than that, but we were really driving ourselves in the ground with the way that we were working. That we weren't talking about mental health. We weren't talking about anything having to do with really balancing and shifting in the way that we use technology more, and all the things that we used to say. Let's work smart, not hard. All those things, those platitudes. But quiet quitting came around, and for a lot of us, it wasn't that we weren't doing our job. It's just that we weren't going to do even more than you were being valued. And there's a mindset after the pandemic that a lot of people were really shifting to figure out what's my purpose and what's my value, and how am I taking care of myself and my family. All those eye-opening things that we all kind of experienced together coming out of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, and then came to 2022. People just said, that's it. I'm not going to give more than I'm getting, and I'm still doing my job. So when I saw the article from Larry Summers, and it really was hitting on productivity, and he was trying to align it back to quiet quitting being the reason that productivity was going down, I thought, I don't see it. But that's just my experience, because I know I worked a lot harder when we shifted to working from home, because I wanted to prove that I was working, which is crazy. So a lot of us went into that cycle of trying to prove the point that we were productive. And then 2023, we're all in the burnout mode, right?
Right.
So that I thought was interesting.
That's that all of that is interesting. Everything you said was interesting. I have to make a clarification of something that I said earlier, which was I thought it was 60 million hours in the aggregate, not doing any kind of math. Okay. Because I'm sure if I tried to do the math, if I did the math, there are, I think, 180 million workers in the U.S. workforce. Like, it's not that much time when you say 60 million. It was 60 million hours per day.
Wow.
That people gained. And then what they did is they calculated a period from March to September, and that was 9 billion hours that was gained. So anyway, I dropped something from the University of Chicago that I just pulled up. I mean, I didn't read it, but that, is speaking to the issue. If you just type in to Google, you can find out more about, there's lots of articles talking about all that time that was saved because people were not commuting, and how they were using it. But the point that you're making about quiet quitting, I think the assessments associated with why labor productivity is going down stems from underlying beliefs about that you have about workers generally. Oh, here comes Kim Blue. She's popped up. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Are you feeling a little better?
Yes. Sorry.
He's still
Sorry.
there. I was telling Lenwood this is, Kim and I are in the same state. And so we just happen to be the state where we just
You
keep
mean
getting sick all the
location?
time.
You don't mean like
Yeah.
state of being.
Oh, no. Location.
Same
Same
location.
location.
Same location.
Yeah, I don't. Thank you for the grace. I don't know how I was literally like getting ready, and so nonetheless,
That's all
I'm here.
right. Lenwood has answered our question about. I'm just kidding. I was giving my feedback on quiet quitting and why I don't
And,
like that
Oh
term.
my goodness.
and speaking to what Larry Summers said, which
Yeah.
is that he says that the phenomena of quiet quitting, and there was another one, it was like minimum something Mondays or something, and he was saying, hey,
Yeah.
these are the reasons why labor productivity is down. And I said that before we have facts about why labor productivity is down, we have people who are hypothesizing about why, theorizing about why labor productivity is down.
Yes.
And I was saying that your theories are going to stem from your underlying beliefs about people, about work from home, about the terms quiet quitting and whether those things are exist. So that, I think it's what he is attributed, because he doesn't have any research, I don't think, about why. I mean, he can tell that labor productivity is going down, but I don't think there's been enough time, or maybe the research is underway as to why labor productivity is down. There are other reasons. There are other potential reasons. It could be that people are simply overwhelmed by digital communication. And so productivity is down because people don't know whether they should go left or whether they should go right. They could be working very diligently and going nowhere. Wouldn't that also result in a lower amount of productivity?
Definitely. I think, sitting in the seat of someone who has strategized with companies about what return to work was going to look like, but also helping companies also think about how we optimize a distributed workforce, whether it's leadership and people, whether it's people only and then leadership does a hybrid, because I've seen all the models. I think two things. One is, I think people didn't know how to do this before. And so they were just sort of staying employed and working. And we were labeling it underneath performance, right? Performance management, or it was sliding up underneath something else. And so now we've been able to name it, where we're not necessarily replacing employees who are disengaged with, employees who are completely checked out.
Yeah.
And then the reason, or having heavy influence, is all of the environmental factors, right? There is less separation of this life. It's all existing in the same place. So that's the first thing that I'll submit for consideration. The second thing is, there's been this awakening that is also balanced with everything that people have been experienced. And so we've seen more of a shift, right? It's now more of an employees market than an employers market. And so employees are saying, this is what I want in my ideal situation. And so it's a little bit of, if I can't control all of these things over here, I can't control the environment, I can't control any of this stuff, then I am going to try to control what I can and ask for these things. Whereas before it was a little more, if you want to come work for us, here's what we're going to offer. Now employees are saying, I do want to come work for you and I want you to offer me this. And if not, I'll go somewhere, because other companies are now doing that. Right. And so companies that were like the pretty girls at the party. So my analogy is always the pretty girl at the party. Right. So there were companies that were like, oh, we're the pretty girl at the party, right? We got the nice lipstick, right? We got a nice bag. My dress is this. And then now other companies have come to the party and been like, well, I got a nice bag. And my lipstick isn't red, but it's a nice shade of pink. And you can come right over here and have pink lipstick and, right, hors d'oeuvres and, mocktails, whatever your jam is, right? And so the market started to be more competitive. And so all the girls were pretty, right? And so now where are you right? Where are you going? Is that you're not limited in your choices in terms of brand awareness and brand acknowledgement. And so I think that has really sped up everything, especially with the conversation around burnout,
Mm-hmm.
especially the conversation around mental health, especially right because the level of unrest around mental health, right? When we think about unrest, we mean global, social, racial, all these things, but like there's an entire sort of mental health unrest that is taking place. All of that, I think, is factoring into productivity being low. And you're seeing a shift where people are like, I'm actually choosing to withdraw in an effort so that when I do find my passion, my thing, I can bring all of me into that because they're not willing to sacrifice it anymore. Right.
That's a great
So
point. We started right before you joined. I was sharing my take on kind of the attitude, the nature of work, and employees' motivations have really changed. And I was saying I was that we kind of sensed that right after the pandemic, during the pandemic, and all of that. So I was going to say pan-eric. I try not to use the P word a lot, but right after, really the beginning of last year is when I first started seeing these words being cycled out. And again, this is where I'm also very cautious in where does this come from? Because what we tend to do is, especially on the LinkedIn streets, is that we'll see these terminologies roll out, and then we go really quickly from being empathetic to owning it and making that a part of our identity. So I was in conversations where I would have people trying to convince me that I must have this thing, therefore X, because it's on, because everybody has it on LinkedIn. You must be, how are you managing quiet quitting? Well, no, I'm still working 150%. What do you mean? I'm not, right?
How are you managing?
How are you managing? Yeah. And you'd see these articles churning out, like people are whipping out these articles for the likes and clicks. And then you have employees going, well, I must have that because everyone else seems to. And so now you have to respond to that in some kind of way. And even in responding to that takes away from productivity because now you're spending time as an organization trying to figure out whether your employees are experiencing this in real terms, or if this is something that is another, lean in movement, right? Remember that. So when I was preparing for the call, Kim, and I was going through some of my notes and kind of researching and all of those things. I also couldn't find any information that was data driven that showed that productivity dropped. And I can tell you, even in the organization that I'm in, it didn't. In fact, revenues have been fantastic. So we have proof points that it didn't. And so it's when I think about labor productivity, I was also trying to figure out, is this something that is a white collar versus blue collar type conversation?
So that's a great point. I will actually add to that one thing for consideration from probably like a DE&I standpoint, right? This is the first time we've had 5 generations in the workplace. Let's just call attention to that. And so are there like generational considerations that come into this in terms of the way that we do that? I don't know if either one of you had come across that because there's not a lot of research out there about it. There's tons of generational stuff as we talk about, Jedi, justice, and DEI, all of that stuff that plays into parts of this. But when we talk about productivity, the differences between, Gen Z is right. I'm an Xer, I'm a cusper, I'm right on the cusp of X and whatever's left, right? But I was raised by a boomer, and now you're seeing people work in the workforce a little longer. And so is that having an impact on productivity at all? Or is that even being a consideration? And my question would be, if so, how do we even go about measuring
That's right.
that? Like, what does that look like? Right. So I don't know if either of you thought about that, but that's something that I thought about as we were coming into as I was listening to you, but also
Yeah.
as we were coming into our
That
conversation
is the
today.
perception also of productivity, right? Because as an older woman, I might be looking at a younger person and saying, I can't believe I'm working 10 hours a day because that's just how I was raised. That's how you do it, right? And that person is like, are you crazy? But I'm taking a 1 hour lunch. I don't take lunch. So what does that mean? Is my perception of productivity? Are you, so this is where it's like, again, the white collar, blue collar thing. Are we assigning value to what we're doing in one space, and in the other space, it's more about like completing the task, doing the thing during a certain amount of hours, and so that I think does impact the way that we treat productivity. Because I've worked with people who have done less in one day. I can run circles, and you know what I mean. Like I'm working around people who have. In my one day, it takes them a quarter to do what I'm doing, right? Just as an example, right? So is it our perception that's also clouding the way we respond to labor productivity? And we're not talking about labor shortage. That's totally different, right? We're not talking
Right.
about headcount and manpower. We're talking about productivity and what are the expectations from our teams and our leaders? What does that look like? Is it clear to you when you go to a company what is the expectations when it comes to productivity?
Good
Yeah,
point.
the interesting thing about the conversation around labor productivity, and I think this is, I think you both have highlighted different things about what it could be. I said, it could be something else entirely, and when I look at something like this, like a big trend, I assume that it's a systemic problem, meaning that how could it possibly be attributable to one thing like
Right.
quiet quitting? Well, it's just that everybody's quiet quitting. And that's why labor productivity is down.
Yeah.
Or it would have to be a huge number of people who are quiet quitting. 50% of people are quiet quitting, and that's why labor productivity. I mean, I just can't. I have a hard time believing that something that is systemic at that level is, unless there is a systemic cause.
Yeah.
So, for example, during the pandemic, I'm not sure why you don't say that word, but we'll talk about that another time. But
I'm scared I'm going to bring it back.
Say it, we'll have one. But anyway, I'm not. There was because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Nobody was commuting.
Yeah.
So it's easy to say we got this number of hours, and it's attributable to the fact that nobody was commuting because there was a systemic reason, the pandemic, that people were not going to work. That's easy. But here, you got some people who are working from home, some people who are going to work. How can you say that it's the people who are staying home are the reason why labor productivity is down?
Yeah.
And all the people who are going to work are so happy to be in the office that they are working like crazy, but they can't make up for all those lazy bums. I mean, it just makes in my mind, it just doesn't make sense to attack the issue in that way.
So this is why HR is not an exact science, right? It is not crystal clear in terms of things because it is human trending. It's human things, and it's right. So my master's degree is in organizational development. So I literally study human behavior in the workplace for fun. Like, it does not get any more HR or social science than me. Okay. Like, I'm in. And when I look at behavior patterns, because what you're talking about is the unpredictability of it, Linwood, and not attaching it to this concrete thing. And that is the nature of org design. It's today we're going to structure these things based on these behavior patterns, right? And so these things not being consistent or not being rooted in anything other than this is what we know, and this is what we can measure, and this is what we can attest to. And if all of that changes overnight, well, now then what are our, what are we rooting our logic in, or whatever the case may be? And so the pandemic has been one of those things that, because it's had such variance, everybody's behavior or response to it has varied as well. And so that's the other thing, right? So many of the factors touching it. We just talked about mental health. We just talked about multiple generations being in the workplace, right? Well, probably up until the pandemic, there may have only still been four. And now, right, some of the other traditionalists, right, which is the oldest generation in the world, they may have decided they're going to stay in a little bit longer. Same with boomers. They're going to stay in a little bit longer. They would work. And now, right, my kid who's 9, right, is 10 years from entering the workforce in theory, right? But Gen Alpha is not far behind the rest of us. And those kids are coming into whatever it's going to be. So because it's not a fixed thing, I think that there's been a lot of confusion, or just like, where does it come from around why can't we sort of pinpoint what that is? And we may get to it one day. I think we will, as we talk about labor trends, as we talk about workforce evolution, certainly as we talk about other topics that are going to help the workforce, right? Things like collaboration, things like being able to measure engagement and what that will look like in the future, right? But right now it's so inconsistent, right? And it could change again tomorrow, right? Shelley's not using it because she doesn't want it to come back. But if it were to come back tomorrow, your point would still ring valid, Linwood, until we do get something, you know what I'm saying? Like, until we do get something. And that's me sort of sitting in the CHRO hat and going, all right, I see how people, like, today the policy reads this, but then tomorrow it may need to read something different.
Well, I think I'm glad that you brought up that issue of the CHRO, who may be confronted with these headlines, and a CEO who's saying, hey, is our productivity down? Or how would we measure that? Or how do we measure that? What could we do about it? And I think the point that I'm suggesting here is that a problem that is complex, like labor productivity being down, has many causes. And so so looking for a root cause and saying, this is the reason, and then based on that idea about what you think the reason is, or that hypothesis, making a decision, that approach is problematic. It's inherently problematic because of the nature of the problem. So what we need to do in that situation is actually come together in a collaborative way to figure out how are we going to solve, if we think we have this problem, how are we going to solve it, rather than trying to find the root cause. Well, what could we do to increase engagement and get people more productive? What are the options available to us? Now, you can say, well, okay, well, why don't we experiment with some AI solution? Or why don't we experiment with a collaboration training? Okay, we want people working together better. Let's try some things. Let's take some small experiments and see what increases engagement, what increases productivity.
And the differences between the two, because there are organizations that look at engagement. Engagement is not necessarily productivity. For example, engagement from the lens of employees participating in, you mentioned DEI, so DEI events and activities, but it takes you away from your day job, so you're not actually being productive. So even those lenses that, as you're pointing out, I think in order to make this work, to Kim's point, and I love HR and I've been in HR for a while, I get it, y'all, but it is the fact that there's so many factors involved. It is the quirkiness that it is. These factors are also interrelated. Those roles that are considered those soft skill roles, like how do you measure someone who's in HR Right? It's not exactly the same. It's not the same way you'd measure someone who's a project manager within the business, or a salesperson. You know what I mean? It's different. So the technological factors, AI that you mentioned, the human factors, the different skill sets, upskilling, and all the education factors, and then some of the practices. So this is another thing I was thinking about with Larry's article, Larry's response, which I think was like, no, okay, because then I was thinking about like the management practice. So I know we talked about this in previous sessions. We talk about the impact in the way change management happens and all the collaborative things that we need to do. And I was thinking then, what would need to happen from a management practice in the way that we treat and measure and respond to labor productivity. If, for example, if you're in an organization where you have a mixed environment of both salaried and hourly workers, right? And those are kind of the confines. How do you address labor productivity given those type of factors? So the management practices also came to mind, because you might have a leader who's looking at productivity as, Linwood has been in this session, this 1-day session for 5 hours. He's super productive. Samantha's at her desk. You know what I mean? It's that those management practices, and they're not aligned. So I think this is one of those conversations that we definitely need to, at least the CHRO teams and leaders and CEOs need to be considering, but really dissecting all of these different factors that we've kind of thrown out.
Yeah.
I mean, I do a little bit of looking at this.
Tell us why, Linwood.
I do a little bit of looking at this. I've been looking at it for quite some time. But if I am looking at labor productivity, first of all, number one, I question the measure.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that measure has changed since our economy has changed dramatically away from hour of input equals hour of output, or some output. But I look at things like, what impact might to your point, what impact might management practices have?
Yeah.
Maybe people are just tired of being told what to do. that is as much.
Just want to do my job.
That could be just as much a factor as anything else.
Yes.
What about values?
Yes.
Both of you, right? What about values? Like, where does that fit into? Okay, so what I'm doing my values do not align with the values of the organization, or they've not been communicated, or they've shifted, and what I was brought in to do, I'm now not doing. And so, like, where does that play into labor productivity?
That is huge. Hi, Katina. So that is huge, because that goes back to a point. I try to make this point as much as I can. It's the window dressing as well. So if you're sharing with your employees that these are the 2 or 3 things that will make you successful within the function, within the job, right? This is how you align back to our goals, our priorities, and all those things. And then your HR/employer brand/ corporate team comes up with some new mindsets that no longer align, and now you're starting over, essentially, right? Here are some new values. We've shifted. We've come out of the pandemic and we've shifted, and now you're being expected to produce aligning to these new values. Am I productive? Because I'm still, I might still be hanging on to, we use the word innovation, but innovation isn't saying, hey, here's a new spreadsheet, do this in Excel. That's not necessarily.
We're innovating.
Right? We're innovating. Let's upgrade, and we're still going to use Excel to solve complex problems, right?
We just talked about this. We talked about that. Actually, you raised something which I had kind of forgotten about just a few episodes. I guess it was episode 2 weeks ago, where we were talking about how change fatigue.
Yes.
I read an article, or I read several pieces about. Actually, it was Michael Arena was talking about the activity avalanche, and what he was saying is, you had people, we had the remote working situation. Then CEOs in some companies, they wanted people to come back. We had a period of resistance. Eventually we got return to work mandates.
Yes.
When those return to work mandates went into place and people started coming into the office, all of a sudden, all these initiatives started raining down the organization. And then people were talking about change fatigue.
Yeah.
So maybe actually the reason why labor productivity is down is not work from home, but return to the office.
They're tired.
Arenas is the activity avalanche. I mean, anyway, that's just looking at it from another, but as when you said that, I literally went through my mind about, oh yeah, that's right, we're returning to work. Then I heard about the resistance. Yes. Now people are back in the office. Then it was like activity avalanche. Next thing I know, we're talking about change fatigue. Now we're talking about labor productivity.
And it's because the engagement got, what happened, a lot of companies were using culture as kind of like the stake in, if you come into the office, now you're experiencing our culture. A lot of companies had terrible cultures before everyone was working from home, but you never fix the culture. You just want people to show up and kumbaya it. So, I love this. So much of working culture is at odds with innovation. Thank you, Chris, which makes it so ironic. I love that.
Yes, I was going to call out this comment, and I think that it is like absolutely spot on, right? The culture work that you were talking about, Linwood and Shelley, right? Like not being evolved or not having like good culture before just exacerbates, right? The things that we're doing now. And so now when we talk about complex problems like labor productivity, and then we talk about adjacent complex problems like, well, is that a result of change management? Is a result of not being aligned in your values? Is it a result of all of these things, right? So when you start to look at what your complexity matrix is for this one challenge, it gets to be multidimensional. Yeah. And so now you're looking at, we've got to solve for this. Where's the right place to start? Culture is probably the most complex of all of those. Sorry, Lynn, when I was laughing at your face.
It's when this whole thing, they started talking about labor productivity going down 5 quarters ago. Oh, labor productivity's down. And the first thing I thought, it seemed pretty obvious to me. I'm not saying that I'm like some know-it-all, but it just seemed like there's an obvious reason why productivity is going down. And here it is.
Yeah.
Productivity went up when people went home because they got a couple more hours. They weren't commuting.
Yeah.
Now they were required to come back to work.
Yeah.
So they're commuting again.
And doing less.
You just lost the time that you gained from not commuting. So it's pretty obvious.
Which is what led to quiet quitting, Linwood, which is what happened, because people were like, forget it. I'm just going to do my job. So Katina has a note.
Oh, here we go.
As well. Yeah. The thought of going it is exhausting. I just want to do my job. I just want to do my job. Trust me to do my job. And it does actually cause change fatigue. And no, this doesn't mean, listen, I know there are folks who are watching now live and you'll catch the replay. And we're not saying that going in the office isn't a thing, because I actually also go in when I need to, when there's a reason and a need to. And it's very intentional, and I am very productive because there's an agenda and there's an intention behind it. It's not just going in just to go in. But that in itself, just being mindful. So it's, again, what's more important? Is it the engagement and the engagement numbers, or is it actually productivity?
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is get much more serious about management practices. And that's where the intention comes in, because before, when we took the office for granted, that's just what you did.
Yeah.
Everybody's going into the office. There was no question about it. Okay. I wrote a little blurb on a post about this. we attributed so many things to being in the office that maybe that wasn't the reason why. Like productivity isn't because we're in the office, or innovation isn't because we're in the office, or our culture isn't about the offices that we're
That's right.
like we use the office as a proxy for all of these things. But what we need to do is actually be intentional. We need to design the experiences that we want so that we achieve the outcome we want. That's what I mean by management.
That's such a good point.
We can't just say, oh, we're going to just put everybody in the office and it's going to happen. Because we have a bunch of meetings and we've got Slack and Teams and we put a video thing, we put some conference rooms in there, and innovation is going to happen.
So let me
add somebody to bump into somebody else. I mean, but that's what I'm describing is how it was done.
Yeah. So let me add to that, Linwood, right before I have to jump and put my mom hat on, right? For a moment, right? So if you look at the history of the workforce, right? When did we really start going into the office? When did that become the thing, right? Because before that, there were different types of jobs, right? We were in a different age or industry, right? So when we moved into, the industrialization age, right? Where we got away from, agriculture and manufacturing to like a turn, right? That was the office then.
Right.
And so in order for you to be productive so that you could exist, that's where you had to go to do the thing, right? And the rest of those offices were in pockets, right? People had those houses in those rooms in their homes or wherever they went to go do all of these things, right? And then we moved from that into more of these roles where, as we saw, right, financial services stand up, as we saw white collar roles become more popular, then it was this evolution of, well, we need to modernize in this ways, right? And modernizing was like typewriters and all of these other things that were happening. So when you look at the evolution of how we have gotten to these places, it's almost not surprising that now here we are saying this, because productivity has been driven, or these environments have been driven by where we go to do that. But home was always not the place where you did these things.
That's a good point.
At all.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of a mindset shift that has to happen. And so that's been very much a battle as we talk about workforce of the future, what that looks like, and this true acceptance of hybrid workforce being a real approach to productivity, but also being a consideration for how we design, labor strategies, period. Because those strategies that we design or employ are going to be the very things that inform that. But I wanted to just call out the history of that, because you were raising good points, Linwood, around saying you can't just shove the people in a room where you couldn't. But back in the day, they used to shove them in a cave, right? They would shove them in a factory, right? Or they would shove them on a whatever that work was. And now add in technology, add in AI, add in experience. Now people are like, all I got to do is shuffle down my stairs. You don't have to shove me anywhere. I just got to go downstairs, right?
Or
and I do everything, right?
Yeah. So what that actually, I'm glad you talked about that, because like technology has huge implications for what we think about work, how we work, and now proximity.
Yes.
How important is it that I be in the same room with Shelley? And that inevitably is the question. And so, one of the things I love about Ed Morrison's work and what he has uncovered in the collaborative sciences is that collaboration is not a function of proximity.
That's right.
It's a function of our conversations.
That's right.
It's the conversation. The technology that we use to spread information, to spread knowledge is the conversation. Whether we're having that conversation using Slack or we're having that conversation in person, or we're having that conversation over Zoom, what's important is that we're having the conversation.
Right.
And that brings me to Apple Vision Pro. And I wrote a post. My first reaction to, I had back-to-back posts. First post was, that is so ridiculously expensive. I don't care what it does, unless it transports me somewhere. There's absolutely no way. I just immediately assumed it was like an entertainment type device.
There goes our Apple sponsorship.
I wish we had an Apple sponsorship. But here's the thing that I'll say. Okay, so then after I got over how ridiculously expensive it is, I went and I looked at the video about what it can do. When I saw the amount of technology in the device, I said, whoa, I understand why it's so expensive, because there's so much technology in there. Yeah. But I said, my actual words were Apple just gave the commercial real estate industry a groin kick. That's what I said, because that device is transformative. It really is. The experience, like, for example, the way that it images you so that your actual, the way you look, not some avatar that kind of looks like you. Like, I love the black circle face with the goatee that I was wearing a goatee for a while. So anyway, now I'm wearing a beard. I would put a beard with you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Me and literally 500,000 other black guys.
Yeah.
Look like that avatar. Apple has changed the game by making it possible to present my actual image in a way that if I'm using these glasses and I'm interacting with people, it feels like we're in the same room, even though we're not. Now, let me ask you, if it feels like we're in the same room, do we need to be in the same room?
Some people need that. So real quickly, Enrique. Oh, and Kim, do you have to run?
I do. I'm just going to say this. I think that there are always going to be some people who do need to be in the same room for their reasons around productivity, right? And this goes back to a little bit of the measurement and some of the things that we were talking about, or like how you measure some of those things. But I think there's always going to be that thread of, because this is the best way that I work, I think people are gonna want to be there. And is it gonna have enough influence? Right. And then the new complex problem is, well, then how do we manage the VR among the AI and the people in the room, right? Which is a completely different people rising conversation.
That is a completely different people rising conversation. But I agree with you. The question is, do we base our organization's cost structure? Is our real estate strategy?
Think about the hiring. If we hire somebody, oh my God, we need more time. And I have to think about virtual hiring, right? Like I'm going to finish the replay of this later, but I'm curious to hear what you both have to say about this point around, do we need to be in the room if the AI doesn't mean that we have to, right? So, okay. So see you all later.
Bye, Kim. So around the value, I like, hi, Enrique. I love what he shared about it's hard until it's not. It's expensive until it drives it in the industry.
It was
and hard work versus smart work.
I don't like hard work. my kids said to me, Daddy, you love to work. I said, no, you have a misunderstanding about what Daddy is doing. I do not love to work.
I don't like busy work. I don't like busy work. And the thing is, like, there are folks, that's everyone, we're all made up differently. So there's some folk who really, that's their thing. They like the busy work so that they can say, I'm really busy. I don't like that. I want the value out of it and to know that I'm results driven. So it has to be a result to it. Mm-hmm. But that point about, some, there are some, and there are situations where it makes more sense for you to be in person. There's some, you know what I mean? There's some conversations, there's some meetings, there's some times where you do need that kind of, especially creatively, you're able to bounce off of someone else's energy and kind of flash bomb those conversations, have the brainstorming or whiteboarding or whatever we used to call it. But there are a lot of people that, and there's some things that you can do better off the screen or by yourself. Like if I'm researching or if I'm working on something that needs my attention, physically being in a cubicle and having someone walks by is such a distraction to my creative process that I can't, it's a waste, so that I can't complete the thought, or the idea. But, so there's a behavior around a lot of us. Work was our lifestyle for a long time. We identified by our jobs. I'm so-and-so. And what's the first question, like in I'm American? The first question I notice Americans ask all the time is, "What do you do?" Right? So
Yeah.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? Hi. What do you do? Like, it's the first question. And so, when you're even culturally thinking about it, where our identity is like locked into what do you do? So you got to be able to follow it up with something.
No, this is a great, it's an incredible conversation. I'm going to this triangle, right? It was taught, this is like, what does it say? Edgar Schein's organizational culture model, right? And basically what that model is about is how do we change behaviors, right? And the way we change behavior starts fundamentally with what we believe.
That's right. You have to start with your actual value statement. So for organizations, the same way you do at an organization where you're building your value and your purpose, and those things are founded on principles that's agreed upon. They're aligned to your goals. They're aligned to your, initiatives and all those things.
That's the same thing. What you're talking about, the values. That's this one.
Yeah, I can't see that. What's at the bottom?
Underneath that is the beliefs.
Yeah.
What are the fundamental beliefs?
Yes.
And so what I'm suggesting here is that our experiences are conflicting with beliefs.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that is causing so
I'm
much.
using this. Going forward, that's it. How do you impact? Well, we'd probably get some blank stares.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that, Enrique, because there was a time when I stopped asking people what they do.
Yeah, I don't ask people what they do.
But the reason why that really resonates with me is because that's what drives me, is the impact I'm having.
I love that.
That's what drives me. And wouldn't it be great if we could get to a place where, what impact do you have?
Yeah. That's powerful. How do you impact this world?
That's very different. What's your level of impact? Well, I'm impacting just myself.
I've impacted my kids. I'm paying my bills.
But that's, it's fun. It's funny. I mean, I'm joking, but at the same time, I'm one of those people who is like, I have a very difficult time doing something just to make money.
Yeah.
But there are a ton of people, and I'm not trying to offend you if you're one of these people. I'm just saying there are a ton of people who are like, the only reason I do this is for money, and I need to do X. Money so I can do whatever.
Yeah.
That's why I do that. Like, I have a very difficult time doing something that is just transitional because I need money to do something else.
Yeah.
Like I have a very difficult time with that. I need to be working in my purpose in order for me to have the motivation to do the things that I need to do to be successul. Yeah. I don't know why I'm like that, because there are some times when I say to myself, I wish I could just go get some money. I wish I could just go. I wish I could just set up an e-commerce shop and sell some t-shirts on the side so I can make a few dollars.
That still takes work.
There are a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
That's how they operate. They got a shop over here. They got something else going on over here. They got like this, and that's great. They've got multiple streams. All those streams come together to give them money to do, something else. Or that might be live, or it might be going towards some other dream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
that's okay. I wish I could do it.
Yeah. We need to have a log where we talk about purpose and impact and value and things of that nature, because I think that, and you can see that, and that all goes back into something we talked at the top when we're talking about all the different factors that impact your productivity on the job, is that the people are bringing these things with them to the table. So Enrique says my streams are trickles.
They'll one day be streams. Keep working, brother.
Okay.
Streams turn into trickles turn into streams into rivers, my friend.
Exactly. but yeah, to bring it all together, because that's something else that has happened with productivity. And I think the point that you're making, I really like this, where and Kim touched a little bit on this too, is that some people have it's not quite quitting, but maybe they're not doing 120%, but they're doing 100% because they're putting that extra 20 into something they're passionate about. And and so that would that be considered an impact to productivity? No, that energy is going somewhere else. So you're still quote unquote impacting the market, but in a different way. So it's just such an amazing. I love this topic because it really challenges you to think outside of the corporate box and to think about all the different variables that are impacting productivity.
You just brought up another point which it caused me to think of something else, right? We had the pandemic.
Yes.
Everybody, big tumult to the economy. When the pandemic's over, there was like 3 million people gone. Where did those people go? They're concerned about the labor participation rate. Okay. Well, during the pandemic, if those people were in-person workers, restaurant people, all those kinds of folks, and they had to come up with a new way to make money.
That's right.
Maybe they're people who are now working in a completely different area, doesn't require them to go into an office. It's entrepreneurial. They're contributing to the economy, but maybe it's not getting picked up.
Yeah.
Because there are so many.
It's a gig market. Ways. Yeah, it's a gig market.
So many different ways that people work and produce an income for themselves today. I just don't know. And frankly, I don't know enough about how they measure labor productivity. I honestly considered calling up Aaron Sojourner, our resident labor economist, and having him show up, to talk about it, because I'm really, are the measures, have they changed? Have they changed? I mean, because we had a major event that impacted our economy. So do the measures that worked before, I mean, they were probably already problematic as the economy was changing, if they're the same measure that was being used in 1945. So, that's my question. Is the way that has it been updated to address these changes?
Yeah, that's a good point. We might need
questioning it.
Yeah, I doubt it. I get the sense that we're using the same systems. We're regurgitating things that have been in place for quite some time. We haven't shifted our management practices. We're just kind of, we're just keeping this thing going, and then we go on social media and we throw out some causation words. We do the likes and clicks come out with some new messaging. And
We say what feels good to us.
we say what feels good to us.
Damn it! It's
Quiet quitting.
quiet quitters and work from homers.
Yeah.
You're destroying the U.S. economy. That's what Martha Stewart. You're going to destroy America if you don't get back into the office. I want to say go bake something.
Yeah, meanwhile, companies are doing very well when you look at their profit line. Profit, you know what I mean? Profit's amazing. So
profits sky high. Companies making more money than ever. Price gouging, causing inflation, doing everything else. But it's the workers.
It's the workers' fault. I realize we have 30 seconds left. Please forgive us, Apple, and don't remove your
Martha Stewart.
And Martha, we're sorry.
I like you, Martha Stewart. So anyway, have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see what we're talking about next week. Hey, there is water. Thank God there's water, right?
Exactly. Thank you, Enrique.
Thank God for that trickle.
Thank you,
Thanks
Chris
so
and
much.
Katina.
See you next week, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.